glad you're here. This is our second campus budget presentation of the year. The first one was the 9th of November. And as you remember from last year and this year, we're trying to get out to the campus about every other month as we proceed through the budget build process. And we really see this as a way to bring people along, to let you know where we are as we move through this process. It's never final until it ends, but I think it's best for everybody to sort of have a sense of how we're working through all of this. Today you'll hear from the Provost Hecker, you'll hear from our Chief Budget Officer, Claire Strickland, and you'll hear from me, obviously. Since we're taking turns up here, I think it's actually easiest if we do the whole presentation and then you switch over to Q&A, unless there's something, some clarifying question, you can't read a number or whatever, but it's easier if then we go back for Q&A and we will absolutely put up any slide you want us to talk from, so there's no issues going backward. I can actually work the remote effectively, as it turns out. I do want to thank Sharon Buchanan, because as always, we sort of unload all of this onto Sharon and have her build the PowerPoint. She does a great job, and she also picks the cover slide every time, and she does a wonderful job with that too. The point of today's gathering is to really update you as to where we are in the process. I'm going to go over the first several slides, turn it over to Jeff. You'll see there's a timeline slide that shows you where we are in the course of this year, shows a little comparison to where we'll be next year when we're in our unified budget, our first year of a unified budget. And you'll also see when we're going to be doing our presentation to the Chancellor and our UMaine System Chief Financial Officer, Ryan Lowe, and you'll see when we're going to the FFT committee of the board, and then when we'll go to the full board later in the spring. But all of that will unfold as we go through this. So what I really want to accomplish today is aside from, or my goal in this whole process, I guess, aside from the creation of a balanced budget, because it really is not an option for this campus to go forward with an unbalanced budget. So that just is never on the table for us. But more importantly, or equally important, I guess, is to have the campus understand the process, be engaged in the process, give us feedback, ask questions, engage in the discussion, and as the famous sign says, all of us are smarter than any one of us. So we really do rely on questions and queries. People stop people and have conversations. Creativity is not limited, believe me, creativity is not limited to the people in Alumni Hall. That's a joke, you're supposed to laugh. And the other thing is really this budget that we present and we prepare really has to reflect our campus's priorities, and I hope you'll see that going through. That does not make this easy. This is a very challenging time, and it is still a work in progress. And we'll tell you where we are today. You'll see more granularity today than you saw in November. You'll see even more when we get to it's March 23rd that we'll be doing the next presentation. So, let's say I can run this thing. Here's the agenda. The timeline we'll get to next, a bit of a recap of the key principles in decision making. That really is a recap because you've seen that before. I'll talk a little bit about, in very bare bones, something about our enrollment plan for next fall. Priority setting. This will be where Jeff takes over. He'll be talking about the signature and emerging areas and investments. He'll talk about enrollment trends. We'll move on to talk about the FY17 budget gap analysis. And really this is both what for lack of a better term, I'll call the basic gap and the strategic investments. Essentially, this is all reallocation. But the basic gap is the difference between our projected revenue and our projected expenses. And it's a reallocation so that we can meet our projected expenses. Our strategic investments are also reallocation. So I'm making this point of reallocation because the money does not leave the campus. We are moving money around the campus. We're moving money from one area to another to address strategic priorities that we've identified. But it is not money like going up in smoke and going somewhere else. It is not becoming a slush fund for the chancellor, okay? The money is staying here, but it is being put to the uses that we need to address the finances that we are confronted with. We always make strategic investments, and I've been involved in, I've been involved in building the university's budget at one level or another since about the year 2000. And every year we make strategic investments. It's how a university evolves, it's how a university positions itself to be successful into the future. So there's nothing in there that is shocking or new. If it seems new, we're trying to just say it over and over again so that everybody sees what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we'll talk about the allocation of investments and the target cuts. A little bit on next steps, which is pretty brief, to the point, and then obviously the questions and discussion, which is where we want to end today. So the timeline. The budget build process begins in the summer. We really finish one budget year, June 30th, and the 1st of July is the next fiscal year, and we really start building the budget that we're going to move into. So we started building that fiscal year 17 budget essentially July 1st of 16, or 15, sorry, 15. We meet really, Claire and Jeff and Carol and Meg, we meet every Tuesday morning at 8:30, and we meet almost every week of the year for that whole year, starting in July and rolling forward. So this is a process that occupies significant time and effort. We put a lot of effort into this, but it's complicated. This is a big enterprise. There are a lot of moving parts, and it takes a long time to put all of this together. So if you just look at that, and it's easier for me to look at this screen here, you can see that we start building it in July. In the fall, we put out the FY17 budget materials, go to the chief business officers of all of the campuses in the University of Maine system. So they go out from CFO Lowe's office to the CBOs around the system. There's a review of the allocations and assumptions. Those assumptions, an estimate on the depreciation percentage, an estimate on compensation and benefit changes, the state appropriation, the allocation after accounting for outcomes-based funding. All of that has to be sort of worked through and go back and forth a little bit, some questioning, making sure we're all on the same page. There are, of course, enrollment updates, and we start building the enrollment plan for the future, and we really sort of do that. Ted works on his end, Claire in her office works, and we sort of build the enrollment plan from two different directions to make sure that we are really in alignment, and it's sort of a check on itself that we do it two different ways in a sense. The preliminary gap is finalized in November, and you remember from our November meeting that we had a number, and we rolled out a number, a target for the campus. You'll see that number isn't quite the same. It's actually a little bit lower now, which is, we went in the good direction for us. But we gave you a preliminary number. We're getting closer to a final number, but it's still not totally final. The yellow portion is where we are right now. The budgets were loaded into Main Street at the end of January. You'll see that in February we will go forward and we will have a meeting with the University of Maine System CFO and the Chancellor, and that'll probably it'll be Claire and Jeff and I will go, and we will present our preliminary budget in a very small meeting, just the two of them, so they hear us walk through our budget at that point. A month later, we will go back, and when we do that, we will not hear any of the other campus presentations. They will have a presentation from every campus. Each one is private. We'll go back a month later, and there is a meeting with the Finance Facility and Technology Committee of the board, and every campus will do its presentation, and that's a day that everybody essentially stays around and listens to everybody else. It's a public meeting, so we will sit there and we will hear what the other campuses are doing and how they're addressing their budget situation. And that's in March. At the same time, we will also have CFO Lowe will present the multi-year financial analysis. That is really just a reporting to the FFT committee. We will roll forward, and in May, the board, we will meet once again, I guess, with the FFT committee. But in May is when the Board of Trustees actually approves the budget for fiscal year 17. The one thing Yeah, let me make the point that you heard from Ryan Lowe in December. He presented, he did a presentation on the unified budget, which I'll reference here in a minute. And the one thing that I should mention about that is, I know there's a lot of question about the various, there's about 6 different teams that he has put together. There's questions about tuition and fees, the state allocation model, institutional aid and waivers, reserves, outcomes-based funding, and the capital project funding. Those are all, those are sort of key areas that need to be addressed and understood, and how are we going to handle all of that when we move into this unified budget, which is an area that we have not operated in that realm before. Ryan has put together teams to look at each one of those, campus representation on every team, and so that work is ongoing as this year unfolds. And ultimately, all of this will get presented to the board because there will have to be some policy, I'd say, changes, edits, augmentations in order to move into a unified budget format. Is that correct, Ryan? Yeah. Okay, the key principles, you've seen this before, and really we're trying to do this the same way every time to make the point that really the institution's key principles and values don't change from one month to the next. And showing the same slide a couple times a year, I hope, makes that point. We really want this to be a transparent process. We want people to have the opportunity to hear us, ask us questions, look at the material online, submit queries, submit input online, talk to us when you see us. We want everyone to see this as a transparent process. It's important that once again, we do have to develop a balanced budget. We do have to address the structural gap, and that'll all get explained. And we do need to invest in areas of importance, areas of strategic importance to the ongoing success of the institution. We want to do all of this and minimize the impact on students, on learning, research, and on enrollment. I know everyone on campus is focused on that. Everyone on campus understands the mission of this, the land-grant university of this state. I will say this is very challenging, and I know how challenging it is. And I know everyone is concerned about the impact of this on their colleagues, on the people they work with, on their friends, on their neighbors. And we get that. And so we will just keep working on this, and you'll see as we go forward. I'm sure you'll have questions, but we'll try to answer all the questions we can today. Now, I think this is probably the last slide for me. You can just see up here, we've got the fall 2015 first-year incoming students. We had 2,047 students. We are projecting a growth of about 100 students. Now, already, I know Joel is here. I can't spot him, but he is here. We already know that we've seen a several percent increase over a year ago in our in-state applications. We've seen a double-digit increase in our out-of-state applications. And at this point in time, we're 24% ahead versus a year ago in our acceptances. So I think it's congratulations to everybody working hard, because people were working all weekend to get us to that point. But I think it's very safe to say that we can grow by 100 students. The third column on there basically takes that new incoming class, adds it to the students who will be returning, comes up with a new head count of 10,889 and a projected student credit hour of 272,942. We talk about head count at times, but the reality is it's really, the way we count everything is through student credit hours. And so I'm not a big fan of head count, to be honest, because I think it's misleading. I'd rather express the data as either FTE or student credit hours, and so that's why a lot of the reports come out written that way. One thing that I should mention, I'm sure you all saw that we've gotten we've actually gotten a lot of positive publicity this fall. Through Joel's efforts, we had some new videos made that have gotten a lot of very positive spin, I guess. And we've also gotten some wonderful coverage regarding some changes in our financial aid packaging. The Maine Match program, Maine Matters program, Maine Match, and then Flagship Match. Without going into a lot of detail, the Maine Matters program is targeted to in-state students, really designed to make us more affordable to median income families in the state. You know, in a sense, a subcomponent of that is the Maine Match program. We know that about 10% of students who are accepted at UMaine go on to a flagship campus in one of the New England states. And what we'd like to do is offer them a financial aid package to take that piece out of it. We want to hang on to in-state students who are comparing us to one of the New England flagship land-grant campuses. So this is not aimed at students who are thinking of going to Plymouth State or Granite State. Nothing wrong with these institutions, but this is really aimed at flagship to flagship. And the flagship match program is for out-of-state students who apply to UMaine, get accepted, and then the idea is to give them, it's not promising them in-state tuition, it's giving them a financial aid package that once again levels the floor so that coming to us becomes as financially feasible as staying in their home state and going to that flagship. So I keep making this flagship to flagship point because we do hear about it at times. People wondering, I have to say, the other presidents wondering if we're trying to be competitive with either smaller campuses or some of the small campuses in other states, and we're not. We're looking at students, high quality, high academically qualified students to come to the flagship campus. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Okay, can everyone hear with this microphone? No, one. I hope it's on. Microphone. Oh, now, can you hear me now? Is that better? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, President Hunter. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we set priorities. I'm going to talk about in a couple of different ways. I'm going to talk about our process that we went through to identify our signature and emerging areas and how we're using that, the results of that, to guide us in setting priorities. And the other thing I'm going to talk about is how we need to look at where our students are and the trends in enrollment to give us some guidance on how to use our resources. So these are the hope you have a passing familiarity with this idea that we identified what are our signature areas of excellence and the emerging areas of distinction at the University of Maine. A few years ago, we went through a campus-wide process to identify these. And at that time, we made a public commitment to continue to support these areas so that they could grow. We identified these as areas that serve the state well. They provide wonderful opportunities for our students' learning. They distinguish our university in some important ways. We've continued to focus on these signature and emerging areas. Today's presentation is about our E&G budget, and I'm going to talk about ways that we've made investments, reallocating funds from one part of the campus to another. And what I would say is that in doing that, we're mindful of these areas, mindful that we need to continue to support these areas. Another way that today's presentation about our E&G budget will reflect our thinking about the signature and emerging areas. It doesn't have to do with our investments, but it has to do with sort of the other side, the ugly side of the equation, which is how we manage our budget cut. We haven't distributed our budget cut across the board equally relevant to the proportion of the budget that the area covers. We've been more strategic. It's been a process to develop our cuts and how they'll be applied. But part of what we're mindful of is that we need to continue to support these areas. Now, as I said, today's presentation is about our E&G budget, but we have other ways that we've been supportive of these areas. Perhaps the largest is through our MEIF allocation from the state. As most of you, I'm sure you know, we got an increase in our MEIF appropriation. That's been very welcome. And again, as Vice President Kim, as we work on thinking about how to use those precious dollars, we're mindful again about how we can support these areas and continue to have them be areas of distinction for the University of Maine. We're mindful of them in other ways as well, in how we think about our fundraising, in how when we're looking at certain types of federal grants and how we prioritize things on campus in terms of what we're going to pursue. Now, having said that, we're not, of course, exclusively focused on these areas. We know the campus is more than these signature areas, but we had made this public commitment, and we are following through with that in how we think about our budget. But our strategic plan and our strategic thinking, at the core, of course, is our mission in education, right? We're a tripartite mission: teaching, research, and service. And of these three, the teaching is really the heart of our mission. As you know, part of our strategic plan was to grow enrollment, and we're making progress toward that goal. Again, we have a very dynamic Vice President for Enrollment Management now, who's really brought some innovation into how we're thinking about recruiting. We're focusing on retention of students. We've got a retention and graduation plan. We've got a Think 30 plan to keep more students here. All that focused partly on growing our enrollment. But the other thing we've had to do in looking at enrollment is that it's not that the way students distribute themselves across majors and across areas stays constant as the enrollment grows or changes. There's a lot of shifting around, and we've taken a look at the data over time to see what are the trends in the way students are enrolling at the University of Maine. And they're very enlightening, and we've gone back and looked at these trends to give some guidance for us in how we go about managing our budget. The bottom line being, we need to put the dollars where the students are going. I'm going to show you a few slides that have to do with enrollment trends over the last 7 years. I think the Office of Institutional Research, Ted Caladarchi and his team, excuse me, for putting this together. The data I'm showing you here are majors. So this is the number of students majoring in each of these areas and the trends that have changed over the last 7 years. And you can see, our enrollments have shifted around across the colleges. Our biggest growth area, our biggest single growth area is in the College of Engineering, where there are 400 more students today than there were 7 years ago. And if we gave them a microphone, Dean Humphrey would tell you that in 2001, I think there was another 400 fewer students, or roughly 800 or so more engineering students at the University of Maine now than there were 10 years ago. So we've seen a real growth in that area. We've seen growth in the College of Natural Sciences, Forestry, and Agriculture, and we've seen decreases in some of the other schools. In the Maine Business School, over the last, it's more of a shorter term trend, but over the last 4 years, we're seeing a growth in undergraduate enrollment in the business school. But of course, colleges, breaking the data down by college is only one way to look at it, right? If you take our two largest colleges, they're really quite complex organizations. If you take the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, for example, you've got the visual and performing arts. You also have computer science, chemistry, physics, and math. You've got the social sciences. You've got the humanities represented. If you look at the College of Natural Sciences, Forestry, and Agriculture, you've got the School of Forestry, the School of Marine Sciences, the School of Food and Agriculture. And at the same time, you have more professional schools: School of Social Work, School of Nursing, the Program in Communication Sciences and Disorders. So I asked Ted to take a look and break the data down in a different way for me. So here's our data. If we look across the disciplines, ignoring colleges, look at the arts, the humanities, social science, social and behavioral sciences, and STEM disciplines, and then a group of areas we organized or collected around the title of professional studies. I'll come back to that one in a second. But you can see the trends here, and I think this gives a slightly different, but in my mind, a clearer picture of where our enrollments are changing at the undergraduate level. We have 800 more students today in one of the STEM disciplines than we did 7 years ago. So I've already said that about half of those are in engineering. The other ones are in marine sciences, forestry, and chemistry, in physics. The growth is in those areas. That's where we're seeing the changes in enrollment at the University of Maine. We're seeing decreases in the arts and humanities and decreases somewhat in the social and behavioral sciences. Now, the professional studies, what Ted did was group together business, education, nursing, maybe a few others. And really that lack of change, or that slight 1% decrease, That's really kind of mixing apples and oranges. What you saw on the earlier slide was a drop in enrollments in the College of Education and a growth in enrollments in the Maine Business School. So those are kind of balancing each other out if we look at the data this way. But the point I wanted to make is that if you look again, it's in the STEM disciplines. That's where the student growth is. That's where our students are migrating to. I thought we could look also at the graduate enrollment data as well. Graduate education, of course, is a significant part of our mission. And here we see a slightly different picture. We see the biggest drops in the professional areas. We see the College of Education showing significant decreases in graduate enrollment. Business showing decrease in graduate enrollment. And the other areas showing slight, engineering and LAS showing slight increases. And natural sciences, forestry, and agriculture showing a slight decrease. But again, if we break these data down in the way I did with the undergraduate data, the trends are pretty strong. It's in the professional studies areas at the graduate level that we're really seeing the decrease. There's increase in slight increases in the STEM disciplines, but not the dramatic increase that we see at the undergraduate level. We see the arts and humanities roughly stay the same. You see it, if you look at it as a percentage, a big increase in arts graduates. That's a single program. That's our MFA program in intermediate, which was really launching and getting started over this period of time. So I wanted to walk you through these because these are the data that we grapple with all the time. And looking at how we're going to deal with our budget cuts and where we need to make investments to make sure that we're serving our students. And one point I do want to make is, laying out these enrollment data. I guess there's 2 points I want to make. One is, this in no way am I attempting to imply that the faculty in the arts and humanities aren't working hard enough. They're not out there doing their job. They're not strong. That's not at all the point I'm trying to make. In fact, I know for a fact that we have outstanding, excellent faculty in these areas. The reality is that the trends that we're seeing are the same that you're seeing nationally. And I just pulled a few headlines from publications, national publications, talking about these trends. We're experiencing the same thing that's being experienced nationally: a drop in student interest in enrollments in the arts and humanities, an increase in students' interest in business, and strongly an increase in the STEM areas. The other argument I hear from time to time is, well, of course we're growing in the STEM areas. That's all we ever talk about here at the University of Maine. First off, I don't accept that premise. I don't think it's all we talk about. But I don't think, and I actually also don't think what we talk about has that great an impact on where students decide to enroll, unfortunately. But I don't accept that point of view. I think really we're experiencing part of a national conversation. You can decide whether this is good, bad for the country. That's for another conversation. But it is what it is, and this is what we're seeing here at UMaine. I think I'm going to turn things over now.
Can everybody hear me? Can anybody hear me? Yes, you can. I can hear myself. Sue stated something that I want to reiterate before we move on to the next slide. It's a basic definition of what a budget gap is. We build revenue on this campus and we project revenue. It includes tuition and fees, it includes state appropriation, it includes sales and services and indirect cost recovery. Then we project our expenses, which include compensation, goods and services, debt service, financial aid, and equipment. So when we build our revenue and we take a look at basic expenses, when we subtract the revenue we have from our expenses, or vice versa, it may come up with a negative number if our revenue doesn't support the expenses. So we have to, on this campus, either reduce our expenses or increase our revenue. So what we try to do is try to keep that number at zero. We want to balance our budgets. We want to cover our costs with the revenue that is coming onto this campus. That's the basic definition. So when the campus is asked to cut, it's really reallocating funds from one area to another. It's reallocating perhaps, let's pick on goods and services, to cover the cost of compensation and benefits. So if we're all to receive negotiated increases in FY17, we have to find a way to cover that cost. So we need to move budget that we currently have or increased revenue, if we're lucky enough to have increased revenue, to cover those expenses. So it's not that we're cutting, as Dr. Hunter said, that we're moving money elsewhere. We're basically funding ourselves. I've got it upside down. So I want to begin with what we've defined as a true gap. And I was trying to come up with a term that's a little different than true. And I think I want to call it a basic gap. So that what you see here are the areas of funding that need to be incrementally increased in FY17 to cover the costs of people on this campus, to cover the costs of goods and services, of utilities, of insurance, and shared services. So compensation and benefits are an incremental growth due to negotiated increases that have been agreed to for FY17. Fortunately, the benefit rate has not been increased, so that's remaining flat for FY17, and that amounts to $2.8 million. Since the last time you saw this presentation, I believe in November, we had a funded depreciation increase on the slide of $700,000. We've reduced that by $500,000, and we're trying to keep depreciation, funded depreciation. I know it's a difficult concept, but we're trying to keep funded depreciation at the same level as we were last year. Last year we were 47 or 48% in E&G. We're hoping that we'll be at the same level, increasing our funding by $200,000 to help replace roofs and maintain the campus in its major maintenance, but try to keep at that same level. The system is asking us to be at 85% funded depreciation. We cannot find funding to reach that goal. It would mean adding another $5 million to our E&G budget. We just can't sustain that kind of a cut on this campus. The utilities increase hasn't changed. It's $300,000. And some of you will ask, well, fuels have decreased, electricity costs have decreased. This increase is one of two things. We have more usage on campus with buildings being opened. I mean, if you've been to the ASCC, you see that wave pool being filled with water. And we have the planetarium, we have other buildings on campus that increase the usage of our utilities. Also, in June of 2016, we have a couple of contracts that are coming, that are ending with Emera and with Bangor Gas. We have had tremendous contracts with those two companies, and we're ever hopeful that we can continue under favorable circumstances. Insurance is insurance. We need to buy insurance just as we do in our personal lives. There's a change in existing shared services that amounts to $2 million, and that totals $5.5 million of what I will call a true gap, a basic gap. We've then applied a projected increase in net tuition revenue of $3 million against those costs. And the $3 million reflects a projected increase in out-of-state enrollment, as well as a small but regularly occurring increase in out-of-state tuition. That's where the $3 million is. So the I'll call it $2.6 million gap is what we term the true basic gap. It would be what we would need to do to reallocate or fund our costs if nothing else were to happen on this campus. But we can't maintain the status quo. You've heard President Hunter, you've heard Provost Hecker indicate that we need to invest. We need to increase our quality, to attract students to this campus so that we can continue to increase our enrollment to cover our costs. So I'll go on to the next slide, which shows where the strategic investments are. Most of you can read this. The foundational support of $1.1 million includes funds to cover the cost of foundational courses across the campus that serve all the colleges, including math and technical writing, chemistry, etc. The signature and emerging areas are recognized and funded through this process. You saw the slide previously. There's a base increase to start returning some of the research indirect cost recovery back to departments, PIs, and colleges. It's $125,000. And we've also added $2 million to our financial aid budget to help attract students to this campus. The two smaller areas you see here, faculty recruitment, retention, and advancement initiatives, are all part of retaining, attracting good faculty to this campus. And then there are other smaller academic priorities, such as the flagship internship program and the library digital commons. So all of these strategic investments add up to the $4,575,725 that you see here. In summary, if we added our true basic gap to our strategic investments and then subtracted the increase in state appropriation that we'll see, this is a net increase in state appropriation that we'll see on this campus next year, the total gap is now at $6,565,315, which is down from, if you went back to the presentation that we shared in November, it's down from $7.175 million. I think this is where Sue takes over.
Okay, I'm going to talk about everybody here? Yeah. I'm going to talk about the targeted cuts. Before I do that, I do want to make a point that I know I made in November, and that is, as we've gone through the last couple of years, you're all quite aware that we have made, that the system, the University of Maine system in toto has made pretty substantial changes, and we've centralized a number of the portfolios that we used to have on campus. And Ryan is sitting right here, and we talk about this a lot, but there's no doubt about it that by doing that, we lost, I'd say, degrees of freedom and flexibility that we used to have in addressing our budget challenges. We had more portfolios. I mean, it's simplistically enough, we had more buckets of resources to call on and make adjustments in order to arrive at our final budget and meet whatever gap we had. So that is a challenge that we have. It's a challenge on every campus within the University of Maine system. It's not just that it happened to us, it happened all the way across all 7 universities. So what you see at the top there is this undetermined cut, $2.6 million. And I'm going to call, this is a judgment call, and I am taking responsibility for that number. Those of us working to create the FY17 budget really firmly believe that the reinvestments and the reallocations that have been described are absolutely essential for the future success of this institution. But as we worked through this process, we felt that assigning any deeper cuts or reallocations across the campus would be so fundamentally damaging to achieving our future success that we decided we wanted to explore other options. So we're just parking that amount of money right there. And those options, one of the things is that we have these administrative reviews, and if you've sort of been following along the last couple of years, we've gone through a series of administrative reviews in facilities, in HR, in finance, and I'm missing the other portfolios, procurement. There are savings from those administrative review processes. Those savings are being held at the system level. And there is ongoing, and there will be further discussion about using some portion of those savings to return back to the campuses to help not just us, but the other campuses meet their budget challenges. So I can't say where that is going. It is an ongoing discussion. I've talked to the chancellor about it. I know this will play out over a period of time, but so we're not going any further with that number right now. The other cuts as we go down, if you look at the Vice President for Academic Affairs, and Jeff will be up here in a minute to go in more detail, but the Provost Office and the Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, all of that taken together falls under the heading of the Division of Academic Affairs, and that's $2.696 million. The Provost assigns targeted cuts to the colleges, and the deans work with that cut. They create an impact statement. The impact statement comes forward. The provost and I discuss them and work through and derive a number that we think we can then assign to the colleges. We do this as a team, in tandem. Going down to the other ones, you see the Vice President for Innovation Economic Development, that's Jake Ward, $25,000. VP Student Affairs, $240,000. Obviously, you know what Student Affairs is, but in addition to the sort of the traditional things that you think of as Student Affairs, that area also includes the police. The Chief Business Officer, Claire Strickland's area, was $610,000. That also includes facilities operations, safety and environmental management, the Bursar's office. And then you move into the presidential areas, $120,000, and then a sub-item there, we've separated out athletics, because obviously you'd want to know what the cut is to athletics independent of everything else, and it's $275,000. So all of that taken together leads to a total gap of $6.6 million. And now it's Jeff is up.
So what I'm going to do is talk you through the areas, each area in academic affairs. Talk about where we're making investments and also the level of cut that that area is taking. I do want to, that's College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and I'll talk through it in just a second, but to sort of set the stage, as the President outlined, this was a result of a process. We started out by taking the budget cut and distributing it across the board, so that academic affairs had its portion. We're about 75 roughly % of the university's budget. We got roughly 75% of the cut. I then worked with the deans and directors in academic affairs and asked them to engage in looking at a cut number that represented their portion of the budget cut. And I want to thank the deans for engaging in this. It was this kind of process where I'd say as a group they all were strong advocates for their areas, but at the same time were reasonable and could engage in dialogue about how best to serve the campus. I also want to thank the president. We went through this process. We worked quite hard at it. And then I went to see with her and said, look, there's about a little over $1 million here that I really don't think we should take out of academic affairs. It would be too damaging. She, we had a good conversation about that. We decided that it would be better to pursue other avenues to solve the problem. So in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, we are making some significant investments. And so that number of 947,480 is, taking these positions mostly that we're putting in the college. That's roughly what it costs with salary and benefits. 2 positions in statistics. These serve not only signature areas, but also our signature research areas, and that our statisticians support research in a variety of areas, but also growing areas of teaching demand from business, from engineering, from around the campus. We're putting in a position in English as Assistant Professor of Professional and Technical Writing. Again, if you remember that undergraduate slide showing the growth in STEM disciplines, nearly all these disciplines, or certainly a significant number of them, require students to develop proficiency in professional and technical writing. We have a strong team there we need to add to it. We're putting positions in physics, and chemistry, mathematics, and also some teaching assistant support. We're putting a small amount of support into the Northeast Americas. That's one of our emerging areas. This is to provide some support staff. This is a relatively modest investment, but it is important because when we looked across the portfolio, we saw that we really weren't doing a lot to support that area. Now, we also assigned Dean Haddad a cut, and you'll see that number is $819,000. So then the net, we've actually made an investment in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And that's I think, important. Again, the college serves the entire campus. And if you look at the areas that we're investing in, those are primarily areas to serve the entire campus. But it doesn't mean that Dean Haddad has an easy job. She still needs to go in and work to take out this $819,000. And she's been very creative with her team in thinking about how to do that that has the least impact on the mission of the college. Our other big college, NSFA, we're investing almost $500,000, putting a lecture in ecology and environmental sciences, another area that we've seen really dramatic growth in enrollment. We're putting some support in teaching assistants. We're putting some extra section funding. And we're investing in another joint position with the Honors College. Many of you may be aware that we sort of broke new ground a few years ago when we invested positions that were jointly appointed in the Department of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences and the Honors College. And we have 4 dynamic young faculty in those areas. I think that certainly, I think the unanimous view is this was a successful endeavor. It's made the Honors College stronger. The Honors College is one of our signature areas, so we're looking to expand that. We're doing this with a position that will be shared with the College of Natural Sciences, Forestry, and Agriculture in genomics. We had a grant from the Howard Hughes Medical Foundation to pilot a program that's also been very successful. We're taking that and we're investing in a position. In the College of Engineering, we're investing in a mechanical engineering position. That's through our faculty partner accommodation program. And we're sharing the costs with the college of an advising and internship coordinator, someone with a professional position that can serve these growing number of undergraduate students to provide advising support and also internship support. In the Honors College, as you see, we are, didn't point out, we also assigned the College of Engineering a modest cut for a net investment. In Honors, we again invest in this position, the other 50% of this position, preceptor in genomics. We have assigned the Honors College a cut. Francois and his team can work creatively to pull that together from a variety of sources. A net near zero. It's a mild investment of $1,000. In the library, we're making a small investment in the digital commons. This is funding that was there already, but it was using one-time money each year. And we're base funding that investment in the digital commons, which has been a successful enterprise. We have assigned the library a budget cut as well. The associate provost, this is Jeff St. John's position. We have a real focus, as you know, on student retention and moving students to graduation. We're investing in a position in the academic support area. And of course, we have also assigned a cut to that area. If you look at the two, the net cut is about $70,000. And Vice President and Vice President and Dean of Graduate School, as Claire mentioned, we're looking at making an investment. It says IDC return. Basically, what we've heard the campus. We're supposed to campus work closely with the faculty. We've done surveys. It's one of the most consistent things, if not the most consistent thing we hear from faculty. We need a return of the indirect costs back to principal investigators, departments, to support the growth of research. We have been, I'd say, realistic but ambitious plans to grow this over time. This is an initial investment in that area. In the other areas, unfortunately, we're not making new investments. I'll show you the level of cuts that we made to the College of Education, to the Maine Business School, to Cooperative Extension, to my area. Made a cut in the Division of Lifelong Learning into Marketing and Communication. Now, I want to jump back to something I'd said earlier when I was talking about supporting signature emerging areas. I want to repeat that what I've just walked you through is our investments and cuts in E&G funding. Again, we were fortunate to have MEIF funding to use this year, and so we are making some investments in faculty positions in using our MEIF funds and in other areas as well. But we're investing in some faculty lines in those areas. We'll give you the complete picture in March, but I did want to mention that. So, for example, while Cooperative Extension isn't getting an investment from the E&G funding, we are using some MEIF funds to help support Cooperative Extension. And back to you.
Okay, so here we are on next steps. This is pretty, I think, pretty, in a sense, self-explanatory. So we'll be continuing to refine where we are, refine the budget. We'll make adjustments as we move forward over the next month or so, and as we gather more information. We will be meeting with the CFO and the Chancellor on February 8th, and then we will meet with the Finance Facility and Technology Committee of the Board of Trustees on March 8th. The next budget update for the campus is March 23rd, and that's after both the Finance Facility and Technology Committee meeting and the full Board of Trustees. So we will be a lot further on. We won't be totally officially final, but we will be much closer to a final position at that point. And then the last thing up there is to alert you to we do want your input, and the process for input there, you can go to there's email, umainpresident@maine.edu or umcbo@maine.edu, or you can go to the website, which happens to be on the President's webpage, and click the feedback form. So we actually would like to hear from you and gather your thoughts as we proceed.